If you've ever been disillusioned, disappointed, or discouraged in your search for love, and you know there has to be a better way to find the healthy, soul-filling love you've always longed for, then you've discovered the podcast for you. I know, as Ken's work personally has led me to find the love of my life. So here's your host of Deeper Dating, Ken Page.
Welcome back to Deeper Dating. I'm Ken Page. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm the author of the best-selling book, Deeper Dating, your host on this podcast, and the creator of the Deeper Dating Intensive. And I'm so glad to be with you. In this episode and every episode, I'm going to share with you the tools that I think are the most powerful to help you find love and keep it flourishing and heal your life in the process. Because the skills of dating are the skills of intimacy, which are the greatest and most important, rich skills of all for a happy and meaningful life. And what I'm going to be talking about today is what happens when we go back with a narcissist. And I'm going to talk about this in our personal lives, but also on a national level, what's playing out in our country at this time. And we'll look at some very amazing correlations between the two. But first, I just want to say that if you'd like to learn more about the Deeper Dating path to real intimacy, just go to deeperdatingpodcast.com. You can get my free ebook there, sign up for all of my resources, and get transcripts for every single one of my over 200 episodes. So I am so glad you're here, and let's jump in. So today, I want to merge two landscapes. One is the pain and the danger of being in a narcissistic relationship. Many of us have been in relationships with narcissists, maybe toxic narcissists for that matter. Maybe we have loved ones who have, and we've just watched helplessly to see terrible things happen to them. And as a member of this country, a citizen of this country, many of us are watching our deepest values and liberties being ripped to shreds by a president who is such a profound narcissist. This is a national trauma we're experiencing now as Donald Trump has returned back to power. And my hope is to help us understand both of those so we can choose differently on a national scale in our personal lives and with the people we love. So, if you have witnessed or been in a relationship with a narcissist, you know the cycle. There is this idealization that somehow happens. There's a charm that they have. That is followed with a trail of emotional abuse, an ongoing kind of devaluation which might be subtle or might be profoundly intense and primitive. There's a level of control. And when you finally break free, you might feel really relieved, but you might also be drawn back in by the highs, by the charm, by the idealization, by the manipulation, by the sense of fear that you could never get someone like that again. How many times as a psychotherapist have I had people say to me, I can't believe I didn't realize this, or I can't believe that I did realize it and I stayed. And I've heard so many people say, I can't believe my loved one. Or maybe you've had loved ones who are smart and thoughtful and caring and full of dignity, and yet allow themselves to be in that kind of a relationship and can't get out. It is an agony to watch your loved ones go through that and know that it really is their choice and that there's only so much you can do. I know that pain. I know that pain on a number of different levels. So let's just back up for a second. Let's talk about what narcissism really is. It's a formal diagnosis. It's in the DSM. And there are at least 5 of these traits that you need to have to be a narcissist. Think about people you've thought of as narcissists, and God knows, think about our current president. Grandiosity, need I say more? Sense of entitlement, a desperate need for admiration, a lack of empathy, exploitative behavior, envy, and arrogance. Maybe you have known people like that. Our president exhibits every one of these signs and is causing a level of pain and anguish and despair and alienation in our country that I don't know when we've seen anything like this last. Maybe the McCarthy era. So this concept of a toxic narcissist is not in the DSM, but it describes somebody with those traits plus patterns of cruelty, manipulation, and often escalation that becomes violent. And there was a study done in 2024 that showed that women who returned to partners with narcissistic or psychopathic traits often got really badly hurt. Some were hospitalized, some were killed, many had permanent injuries. This is physical trauma, it's emotional trauma, it's heartbreak, and that is the danger that happens when you give the narcissist permission to enter back into your life and do the things that they most want to do. You have put yourself in a position of profound danger when that person is the President of the United States, perhaps the most powerful person in the world. There is a level of devastation that occurs that is impossible to measure. So, this is also what's called a trauma bond, where you can't let go of somebody even though you see all of those characteristics. And let's look at our country now. So Trump was out of office. We had seen January 6th. We had seen the deaths, the cruelty, the lies, the insanity, the ridiculousness, the threats, the chaos. And we chose to go back. And this is not just politics. It's trauma bonding. People remember the things they liked. They forget how important character is. They don't remember that they're creating and allowing a Frankenstein because the perks that they want outweigh the horror and the devastation and the cruelty that comes with those perks. They stop seeing that. It is a miraculous and amazing hypnosis that occurs, and that has occurred all around the world. As a child of Holocaust survivors, I understand Germany in a way that I never did. Seeing ICE people with masks over their face, pinning people down, ripping them away from their families, taking children who are profoundly ill and taking them away from their families and putting them behind bars. Dear God. So what happens when a narcissist gains the power of being invited back? Then they gain unchecked power. They draw a bubble of loyalty, and everyone outside that bubble becomes a criminal, becomes an enemy. Disagreement is seen as betrayal and punished as such. And we have seen that in Trump's violent threats to opponents, even within his own party. Journalists, judges, scientists, activists, artists, you dissent, you're punished. So I just want to talk about something really fascinating, and it's the connection of narcissism to prejudice. And research shows that clinical narcissism isn't just personal. There is a strong tendency for narcissists or people with authoritarian traits to be more racist. Narcissism is correlated with increased racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, transphobia, superiority, entitlement, lack of empathy, all combined to justify cruelty against vulnerable groups. My dad, who's a Holocaust survivor, said, "I know how to create Germany anywhere." You take a country that's suffering, you find a scapegoat, you make that scapegoat less than human, which in this case on the biggest level is immigrants. Immigrants of color most particularly, but then it is all people of color, it is all queer people, it is Democrats. So in your average narcissistic relationship, that cruelty is emotional. Maybe it's physical. In a country, it becomes policy. It becomes a worldview that dehumanizes. So I want to just give some examples of this. One example is that what the narcissist will do is turn their partners, friends, and allies into enemies. They will poison their partner's thinking against that person, calling that other person, these friends and allies, narcissists, betrayers, and they will do everything they can to plant seeds of doubt, because their survival depends on this inviolate bubble of only the people that allow the narcissist's insane behavior and support it. So it's this strange combination of attraction and fear that holds us to a narcissistic relationship. On a policy level, let's look at some of the things that are happening. One most recent example is nearly 500 metric tons of emergency food aid that was meant to feed 1.5 million starving children for a week was ordered destroyed under the Trump administration, ordered incinerated despite repeated warnings from aid workers. This was intentional cruelty, an absolute refusal to care under the guise of policy. I don't understand how anybody who loves children or anybody who cares about humanity can have a normal sleep at night, knowing that mothers and fathers are being ripped separate from their children, that these children are being placed behind bars. This insanity, these tent-style detention family facilities that are being expanded by private companies that are profiting off of these semi-prisons, detaining entire families, separating families, taking ill parents and ill children and separating them from their parents. My mom was in Nazi Austria, and she describes being a hidden child. And she says the great terror was that they would take her from her parents. And this is what we are doing in America. Tens of thousands of families are being separated. Again, even after all of the prior legal and even corporate outrage. And of course, youth in these centers are reporting PTSD, anxiety, depression, trauma. It's going to be how many lifetimes this is going to shatter, how many ripples of abuse and pain and anguish and numbness and despair and terror are being created by this profound, vicious, shocking, unimaginable cruelty. Unaccompanied minors are being targeted for deportation, and in 2025 alone, internal ICE memos directed agents to locate and deport children who cross the border without parents, using DNA tests and databases to track them and punish them. That's not management of immigration. That is cruelty based on racism, fear, and control. So there's something else here that happens in a relationship with a narcissist, and that is the numbness factor. It's a very, very insidious thing. In the presence of an onslaught, an avalanche, a catastrophe of ongoing insanities and cycles of insanity and outpouring of insanity and spray bullet outbursts of insanity and cruelty, we start to go numb. We start to feel helpless. And I look at some of the people like Marianne Williamson who are not allowing that to happen to them, who are not going numb, who are still fighting. And I am so respectful of them. I have to force myself out of my numbness. My husband has to do that too, and we're both veteran activists because of this numbness factor that happens, this emotional numbness, which is actually survival. It's a kind of, I guess, a mild form of dissociation, which is how we survive trauma and abuse. But in numbness, we don't have outrage. We don't have the compassion. We stop feeling horrified and alarmed. And more importantly, we don't resist. And we actually even proactively imagine what's wanted of us and offer those things. This is how scary and dangerous this is. Think about your friends and loved ones who've been in situations like that. Think about our entire country. Think about the Republican Party per se, which has mostly just said yes to things that are indescribably, unequivocally pure cruelty, pure lies. But they are under this spell of fear, of greed, of love of the perks, of terror of the abuse that will happen to them. And I think of the ICE agents, and I think of the people who are coming out of, who are war veterans, and war veterans from World War II who really felt like they were fighting a good cause, had nowhere near the PTSD of, for example, veterans of the Vietnam War who saw and committed atrocities for a war that on some level they knew made no sense and that they were not heroes for when they came back home. And God knows ICE are vilified and hated on so many levels, and they know that. And so many of them are going to experience PTSD. They're going to be at home with their wives who are just having a baby, and they're going to go to bed and have flashbacks of ripping children away from mothers, and they're going to think, I did that, and they're going to be prone to drinking, to self-harm, to suicide, to despair, because of the parts of them that remain human that will have to face what they did. That's a kind of collateral damage that I don't think a lot of people are thinking of, and God knows I'm horrified by what ICE does, but I also think of those men with broken hearts when they think about what they've done and they have to live with themselves. A lot of those men are not ever going to care. They're just going to want to get out of this and not get in trouble. But the ones with human hearts that they're in contact with will know that they committed pure evil, and they'll have to live with that the rest of their lives. So here is another thing, is that narcissistic abuse escalates with return. The secondary rounds are harsher and they're more violent. Politically, we see what's happening. Intensified threats. The military taking over and being on our soil. Emboldened paramilitary rhetoric. ICE. Attacks on any kind of dissent. And systematic dehumanization. The second time is so much more dangerous, and we are at risk of losing our liberty as a country. We're at serious risk of that. So, what do you do? What do you do when you're in a narcissistic relationship? Well, you need to get support wherever you can get it, even if that support doesn't enable you to leave or doesn't enable you to leave yet. And I think in abusive relationships it takes about something like 7 times to be able to really finally leave if you make it out alive. And I think that it becomes so hard to leave when you've signed up again. There's the cognitive dissonance of knowing, I created this, I allowed this, I invited this back in, which makes it much harder because you feel like you need to be loyal to your decision. These bonds can be broken. In our country, fighting the dissociation, the numbness, the fear of punishment, and the glittery beauty of some of the perks you think there might be, we need to let go of those things and face the fact that quite simply cruelty and inhumanity is cruelty and inhumanity, and that can't be allowed. We need our rage, we need our anger, but we need clarity and reconnection too. Thich Nhat Hanh, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King, and one of my great teachers and teacher of so many of us, he teaches us how to be an activist but maintain your spiritual calm. And God knows we need someone like him at this time. I think someone like Marianne Williamson, who holds her spiritual values but is so fiercely politically aware and empowering, is just really a hero of our times, as are many others. So, we need to be able to name the trauma. When we see the pattern, it potentially loses power. We need to reconnect with our feelings. We need to move past the numbness. And most of all, we need to take action. We need to grieve. Yes. We need to fight. Yes. We need again and again to stir up a ruckus. If we don't know what to do, we need to bang whatever pots and pans we find. And when we do that, after a certain point, we'll find our mission. We'll find what we're meant to do to move ourselves back to humanity and away from this horror that is taking over our country. We deserve safety. We deserve dignity. We deserve to be an ally with other safe powers in this globe. And so does our country. I'm coming back to Marianne Williamson. She said something so smart, and this really mirrored a lot of my experiences during the age of AIDS. I'll tell you what that was. When my friends were dying, I lived in a state of agony and turmoil and deep discomfort in my own skin. Unless I was in the hospital room with them next to them, then I was okay. It was an amazing thing that I learned. And what Marianne Williamson says that I think is so true is, what do we do with our anguish, our discomfort, our sense of suffering, our inability to sleep, our grief, our fury, our helplessness? Well, she says that just like being in the room with the person who's sick, taking action is the thing that gives us the most hope. Not taking action leads to despair and bitterness. And right now, all of us need to take action if we're going to save our country. And any of you who are in narcissistic relationships, take heed. Get support. Talk to your loved ones. Make a plan to get out of that relationship, but make a smart plan. Make a wise plan. Get help from an anti-violence project. Get help from a therapist that deals with this kind of situation, and create a plan to get out, knowing that there will be repercussions, that it becomes more dangerous when you try to leave. It becomes more dangerous when you dissent. So do that wisely. Get support. Create a plan that really makes sense. So I want to just end this intense episode with a moment of grounding. I just want to ask you to just close your eyes for a minute, unless you're driving or anything like that, and just take a few breaths. Acknowledge the pain that's there, but acknowledge too the beauty of your heart. My mom turned 96 today, and she said, "Ken, in my meditations, there's something I have learned." And these are her theistic words. But she said, which I personally like, but aren't for everybody. But you'll get the gist of it. She said, God gave all of us a secret ingredient. And without that ingredient, our lives are empty. And with that ingredient, we can do magic and find meaning. And that ingredient is love. And it's a choice that we get to make because it's portable. And we get to make it every moment of our lives. Standing up for goodness and dignity is a definition of active love. So let yourself feel your alliance with humanitarian actions, your alliance with care, with love, your alliance with the part of you that says no to abuse of others, your alliance with those who are vulnerable and in pain, so that you would be the brave one who stands up for them. That spark of resilience, of remembering what kindness looks like even when it's scary. That spark is our compass. Let's carry it forward in our intimate relationships, in our connection with ourselves. Not for retaliation, but for truth, for justice, for protection. Because even through trauma, hope becomes resistance. My mom at her 96th birthday today said, it's a very, very strange thing. If it wasn't for Hitler, and she opened her arms up, she said, I would not have all of you. She said, history doesn't play out in hours. It doesn't play out in days. It doesn't play out in decades. It plays out in hundreds, thousands, millions, and even trillions of years. And she said, Spirit sees that bigger picture. But she said the universe is reforming itself every day, and it desperately needs our help. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode of the Deeper Dating Podcast.
And that's it for today's episode of Deeper Dating. Be sure to go to deeperdatingpodcast.com, as Ken has a few more gifts for you. Then join us on the next episode.